Claire Whitmore never thought the night meant to mark the happiest chapter of her life would instead shatter her world into pieces. The ballroom at the Drake Hotel in Chicago was bathed in golden light, crystal chandeliers casting shimmering rainbows onto the polished marble floors. The city's elite had gathered here to celebrate the engagement of Claire, a renowned interior architect, to Ryan Caldwell, the golden boy of Chicago's tech scene. Cameras flashed, laughter rang through the air, glasses clinked in toasts, and in the middle of it all, Claire stood radiant in a custom ivory gown, her heart beating fast with anticipation and joy. But then, it happened. In an instant, the warmth drained from the room. Claire, weaving through the crowd, searching for Ryan to join her in the champagne toast, stopped dead in her tracks. Across the ballroom she saw them. Ryan, her fiancé, and Brianna Lane, her best friend since childhood. Locked in a kiss so intimate, so hungry, it stripped the breath from Claire's lungs. It wasn't just a drunken slip. It wasn't a peck on the cheek. It was a declaration. The crowd fell into a stunned silence. A slow, painful hush spread as heads turned, whispers catching like wildfire, eyes darting between the couple tangled together, and the woman left frozen in place. Claire's hands trembled. She could feel her diamond engagement ring biting into her skin, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. Then Ryan pulled away, calmly slipping his arm around Brianna's waist as if this were all part of the night's entertainment. "Claire," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm sorry. But the truth is, I've loved Brianna all along. This engagement. It was a mistake. In that moment, Claire felt like she was standing on a stage, but not as the star of the show. No, she was the punchline of a cruel joke, with 300 people as the laughing audience. The cameras that once adored her now documented her humiliation, capturing every flicker of pain on her face. Her parents, watching from a nearby table, began to rise, their faces pale and stricken. Zachary Moore, her business partner and one of her few true allies, watched helplessly from across the room. But Claire inhaled sharply, squared her shoulders, and stepped forward. She lifted her left hand and slowly, deliberately, slid the diamond ring from her finger. The weight of the betrayal, of the years she had given, of the sacrifices she had made. All of it concentrated into that small, gleaming circle of stone and metal. "You know what, Ryan?" Claire's voice was calm, cold, razor sharp. "When you were down and out, when your startup was sinking and no one believed in you, who took out a second mortgage on their apartment to help you stay afloat?" Ryan's face blanched, his arm still around Brianna. "And you, Brianna," Claire continued, her gaze slicing across the room to her best friend. 3 years ago, didn't you tell me Ryan was below your standards? That he was just a broke tech boy who didn't know how to treat a woman like you?" The crowd gasped. A woman near the back put a hand over her mouth. Cameras flashed wildly as the tide in the room shifted, from stunned silence to electric fascination. Claire tossed the ring hard. It hit Ryan square in the chest, bouncing off and landing with a sharp clink on the marble floor. "You two," Claire said, her voice steady, "deserve each other. But let's be clear about one thing. You didn't leave me. I left you." Without another glance, Claire turned, her gown sweeping behind her, and strode off the stage. Paparazzi lunged forward, flashes blinding her, voices calling her name. But through the haze of lights, she saw Zachary waiting by the door, his expression a mixture of worry and fierce protectiveness. "Claire!" Zachary hurried to her, shrugging, off his jacket to drape over her shoulders. "Are you okay? God, I should have gone up there." "I'm fine," Claire whispered, her throat tight. "Let's get out of here." They slipped out into the cold Chicago night, the chill biting into her skin. But Claire barely noticed. She climbed into Zachary's car, staring out the window as the city's glittering skyline blurred by. Her heart pounded, her mind spinning, but not just with grief. Underneath the heartbreak, beneath the devastation, something new was stirring. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Back at her apartment, the silence was deafening. Claire stepped inside, shrugged off Zachary's jacket, and collapsed onto the sleek white sofa. All around her, framed photos lined the walls, snapshots of her and Ryan laughing on the beach, kissing under Christmas lights, toasting at business, launches. She rose slowly, moving from frame to frame, pulling each one down and setting it face down on the floor, one by one, until the walls were bare. For the first time in years, Claire let herself cry. Not delicate, quiet tears, but raw, aching sobs that racked her chest and left her gasping for breath. She cried for the lost years, the love that had been a lie, the friend who had betrayed her, and the woman she used to be. The woman who had given up so much, sacrificed her own dreams to lift up a man who would so easily discard her. But then slowly, the sobs faded. Claire sat up, wiped her face, and looked at herself in the mirror across the room. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair a mess. But in that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Determination. She stood, her reflection staring back at her with quiet defiance. She wasn't going to let Ryan and Brianna win. She wasn't going to disappear quietly, humiliated and broken. She was Claire Whitmore, and she was going to rise. By the time morning came, Claire had made up her mind. Her phone buzzed with dozens of messages. Her parents, her friends, reporters, even a few business contacts cautiously reaching out. But it was the message from Zachary that made her smile faintly. "Hey, just checking on you. Want to grab lunch later? Also, I have something you might want to see. Big project opportunity." A spark flickered in Claire's chest. Lunch? Sure. But a project. Work. That was exactly what she needed. She had poured everything into Ryan's dreams for so long. Now it was time to pour everything into her own. As Claire pulled herself together, brushing out her hair, applying light makeup, and choosing a sharp, clean outfit, a quiet thrill began to build in her chest. She knew the headlines today would be brutal. She knew the media would be buzzing with gossip, the online comments sections filling up with judgment, pity, or worse, mockery. But they would only see the surface. They wouldn't see what Claire saw when she looked in the mirror, a woman who had just been set free. Her mind raced ahead, past the pain and humiliation, past the whispers and the stares. She was already planning her next moves, already plotting the steps that would not just restore her reputation, but elevate her far beyond anything Ryan or Brianna could imagine. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about winning. This was about revenge, not the petty kind, but the kind that tasted like triumph. And the first step would be taken at lunch. "Claire Whitmore," she whispered to herself, smiling faintly as she locked the door behind her. You've only just begun. If you've been hooked by Claire's shocking story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and support this channel so we can keep bringing you more intense, emotional, and inspiring stories just like this. 1. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, here's a quick question for you. Drop your answer in the comments. If you were in Claire's shoes, what would you do first? A. Take time off to heal and reflect before making any big moves. B. Jump straight into a massive new project to reclaim your power and prove everyone wrong. Comment below with A or B. We're excited to see what you think. Claire Whitmore sat at the window of the small cafe tucked into Chicago's West Loop, the city bustling just beyond the glass. Cars hissed past on the wet street, the occasional burst of laughter drifting in when the door swung open and closed. She stirred her coffee absently, her mind elsewhere, her heart still raw from the wreckage of the night before. She was supposed to be on her honeymoon in a month. She was supposed to be married, planning a life with Ryan Caldwell, a man she had believed in, sacrificed for, and trusted with everything. Instead, here she was, alone at a cafe table, piecing together what remained of herself. Zachary Moore slid into the seat across from her, a familiar warmth in his eyes that steadied her, even before he spoke. "Hey," he said gently, "you're here. That's something." Claire gave a faint smile. She knew Zach had been worried, checking in constantly, showing up at her door even when she'd claimed she was fine. But now, sitting across from him, she felt the weight of his presence. Solid, dependable, unwavering. "I need work," Claire said quietly, her fingers tightening around the coffee cup. "I can't sit in that apartment one more day." Zachary nodded slowly. "I thought you might say that." He reached into his leather messenger bag and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table toward her. Claire opened it, eyes scanning. The top page, her breath catching as she read the letterhead, Han Global. She looked up sharply. "Victor Han?" Zach grinned. "The one and only. His team reached out. They're planning a luxury eco-resort in Napa Valley. Massive project. Multi-year, huge press. They want the best designer they can get, and guess whose name came up first?" Claire's chest tightened. She was flattered, of course, thrilled even, but her mind was already running ahead. Han Global. Victor Han. Ryan's biggest competitor. The man whose name Ryan had cursed in private meetings, whose success he envied, whose empire had always loomed larger and more stable. Taking on this project wouldn't just be good business. It would be personal. She closed the folder carefully, her fingertips lingering on the edge. "Do you think it's a good idea, getting involved with Han?" Zach tilted his head, watching her closely. "I think it's the opportunity of a lifetime, and I think you're more than ready." Claire swallowed hard. "It's not just about the project." "I know," Zach said softly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe you can take this and turn it into something powerful. Not revenge, growth." Claire let out a slow breath. She wasn't sure she believed that yet, but she wanted to. 2 days later, Claire found herself walking through the marble halls of the Waldorf Astoria, every step echoing slightly as she moved toward the private meeting room where Victor Han was waiting. She had dressed with precision. Sleek black suit, hair swept back, makeup sharp but understated. She wanted to send a message, to Victor, to herself, to anyone watching, that she was not a broken woman picking up scraps. She was here to lead. Victor Han stood when she entered, a tall man with silver-streaked hair and a measured smile. "Claire," he greeted her warmly, extending a hand. "I've heard a great deal about you." She shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for the invitation. I've been following your company's work for years." They sat, and Victor wasted no time. "I'll be frank. We're looking to build a destination that's not just beautiful, but iconic. We want sustainability, innovation, and luxury, all in one. And we want someone who understands how to blend those elements, someone who can deliver not just a design, but a vision." Claire felt a flicker of excitement spark in her chest. This was what she lived for. The challenge, the creativity, the puzzle of bringing something extraordinary into the world. "I've already started thinking about it," she said carefully, pulling out her tablet. She tapped it awake and slid it across to Victor, showing him preliminary sketches she'd stayed up all night drafting. "I believe the site's natural landscape should be the heart of the design, not something to be built over or disguised. Guests should feel like they're part of the earth, not just visiting it." Victor leaned in, studying the sketches, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Impressive," he murmured. "Very impressive." For the first time in days, Claire felt the rush of confidence she had once carried so easily. The meeting stretched for 2 hours, a deep dive into possibilities, materials, timelines, and philosophies. By the end, Victor rose, extending his hand again. "We'll be in touch soon," he said, his eyes gleaming. "But I suspect we're going to work very well together." Outside the hotel, Claire stood on the curb, drawing in a long breath of cold Chicago air. She felt alive, truly alive, in a way she hadn't since before the engagement, before Ryan, before all of it. Zachary called that evening. "How did it go?" Claire laughed softly, sinking into her couch, the exhaustion of the day settling into her bones. "It went better than I could have imagined." "I'm proud of you, Claire." Zach's voice was warm, steady. "You didn't just survive. You're moving forward." Claire closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. She hadn't realized how badly she needed to hear them. The next morning, she woke early, sunlight pouring through her window. She brewed coffee, spread the project notes across her dining table, and got to work. There was so much to do: site analyses, material research, environmental studies. She felt a spark ignite inside her as she dove in, her mind alive with ideas and possibilities. But as the day wore on, small tremors of the past began to creep in. Her phone buzzed with notifications, social media posts, gossip articles, online comments. Claire tried to ignore them, but one headline caught her. Scorned designer plots comeback with Han Global deal. Her stomach twisted. She knew the narrative they wanted. The fallen woman clawing her way back, desperate to prove herself, desperate to get revenge. But that wasn't her story. Claire took a steadying breath and closed the article. She picked up her pencil, refocused on the sketches before her, and reminded herself this was about her work, her vision, her future. Not about Ryan, not anymore. Still, somewhere deep inside, she knew Ryan was watching. She could almost feel it. The unease, the jealousy, the simmering anger. For so long, Ryan had assumed she existed to orbit him, to hold him up, to make his life easier. But now, Claire was standing on her own, and she was starting to shine. That evening, as Claire packed up her notes, she glanced at her phone and saw a message from Zach. "By the way, ran into an old acquaintance today. Guess who's asking questions about you?" Claire smiled faintly. She didn't need to guess. Let him watch. Let them both watch. She was just getting started. By the end of the week, Claire was knee-deep in the project, coordinating with environmental consultants, drafting preliminary budgets, and mapping out a creative timeline. The days passed in a blur, but for the first time in weeks, Claire didn't feel lost or broken. She felt driven. Late one night, after hours of sketching, Claire leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. She stared at the model on her screen, the sweeping curves of the resort nestled into the Napa Valley hills, and felt something settle in her chest. She was going to make this place beautiful. She was going to make it unforgettable. And by the time she was done, everyone who had doubted her, everyone who had betrayed her, would see exactly what they had thrown away. Because Claire Whitmore wasn't just coming back. She was rising higher than ever before. The ground was shifting beneath their feet. And Claire was the one moving the earth. The first signs came quietly, almost too subtle to notice. A headline here, a whispered comment there. Claire Whitmore, once the rising star of Chicago's interior design world, was suddenly under scrutiny. At first, she dismissed it as noise, the inevitable chatter that follows anyone on the verge of success. She was too busy to worry. The Han Global project was consuming her days and nights, filling her with purpose and creative energy she hadn't felt in years. She had no time for gossip. But then the whispers grew louder. One morning, as Claire sat in her office surrounded by blueprints and swatches, Zachary Moore entered, his expression tight. He set a newspaper on her desk, the headline screaming in bold letters, "Designer accused of plagiarism. Claire Whitmore under fire." Claire stared at it, her chest tightening. The article detailed anonymous claims that several of her most recent designs bore uncanny similarities to work by European architects. Images lined up side by side, the accusations painted with a broad, damning brush. The writer hinted at ethical lapses, questioning Claire's integrity, her originality, her very right to be leading a project as high-profile as the Han Global Eco-Resort. For a moment, Claire couldn't breathe. "I swear I didn't see this coming," Zach said quietly, pulling up a chair. "But I did some digging. The reporter, he's connected to Caldwell Tech's PR team, Ryan." Claire felt a surge of cold, burning through the pit of her stomach. She gripped the edge of the desk, steadying herself. Of course it was him. She should have known. It wasn't enough that he had humiliated her, broken their engagement, shattered her personal life. Now, as she rebuilt her career, as she clawed her way back into the light, he wanted to drag her down again, this time publicly, professionally. Her phone buzzed with notifications, the online fallout already in motion. Blogs picking up the story. Social media users piling on. Doubts, questions, critiques. She knew how this worked. In the court of public opinion, the accusation mattered more than the truth. For a few moments, Claire let the despair wash over her. She thought of everything she had poured into her work. The late nights, the relentless pursuit of excellence, the belief that design could be more than just surface beauty, that it could change how people felt, how they lived, how they connected to the world. Was all of it about to be undone by one man's petty revenge? No. No, she wasn't going to let this happen. Zach watched her carefully. "What's the move, Claire?" She straightened, her eyes hardening. "We fight." Within hours, Claire assembled a team, her legal counsel, a PR strategist, several respected figures from the design community who had worked with her and could vouch for her authenticity. She gathered documents, timestamps, concept sketches, all proving her original authorship. She drafted a public statement, measured but firm, addressing the accusations head-on. The night she released the statement, Claire sat on the floor of her apartment, her back against the couch, laptop balanced on her knees. Zach stayed with her, pacing the room, checking updates. The responses came quickly. There were supporters, former clients, colleagues, even international designers who publicly condemned the smear campaign and defended Claire's work. There were skeptics too, of course. But the tide began to turn, and then came the twist Claire hadn't expected. A tip arrived in her inbox, an anonymous email detailing connections between the article's author and Ryan Caldwell, including payment records, coordinated talking points, and private messages revealing the attack had been planned for weeks. Claire sat frozen, reading the email over and over. Zach leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed. "If this is real, it's real," Claire said softly. "I know it is." With the evidence in hand, Claire's legal team moved swiftly, filing a formal complaint against the publication and launching a lawsuit for defamation. The story flipped almost overnight. What had begun as an attack on Claire's reputation became a scandal surrounding Ryan Caldwell's unethical business practices. Victor Hahn called Claire personally. "I've been watching the way you're handling this," he said, his voice calm, thoughtful. "Most people would have folded under the pressure. But you stood up. You fought back. And you're winning." Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Thank You. That means more than you know. I'm increasing the scope of our partnership, Victor added. There's another project I want you to look at when you have time. Something even bigger. Claire's heart pounded. Bigger. More. She could hardly believe how quickly the tides had shifted, but underneath the exhilaration, she felt something darker, sharper stirring inside her. Ryan had tried to ruin her. He had used every tool at his disposal, personal betrayal, professional sabotage, to make sure she stayed crushed under his heel. And yet, here she was, not just surviving, but thriving. It wasn't enough to escape his shadow. She wanted to expose him. She wanted the world to see who he really was. Late one night, Claire sat alone in her office, scrolling through old files, old emails, old contracts. She knew Ryan's business practices had always been murky. He cut corners, exploited loopholes, fudged numbers. For years, she had looked the other way, trusting his reassurances. But now, with clearer eyes and a sharper mind, she saw the patterns she had once ignored. She began compiling everything she could find. Zach noticed the shift in her energy. "Claire," he cautioned, "are you sure you want to go down this road?" Claire looked up, her expression calm but resolute. "I'm sure. This isn't just personal anymore, Zach. He's hurting people. He's lying, cheating, stealing. And he thinks he can get away with it because no one's willing to stand up to him." Zach sat down beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Then we stand up to him. Together." In the days that followed, Claire worked with quiet intensity, feeding information to the right places, connecting with journalists and investigators who had long suspected Ryan's empire wasn't as clean as it appeared. She knew it would take time, patience, strategy, but she was ready. One evening, as she walked out of a meeting, her phone buzzed with a text from Zach. "Turn on the news." Claire ducked into a cab, pulled out her phone, and watched as the breaking story unfolded. Caldwell Tech was under investigation. Financial irregularities, potential tax fraud, whistleblower reports emerging from inside the company. Ryan's face appeared on the screen, his carefully curated public image cracking under the weight of scrutiny. Claire sat back in the cab, a slow, steady smile spreading across her face. This was just the beginning. She didn't want to destroy Ryan Caldwell out of spite or bitterness. She wanted accountability. She wanted justice, not just for herself, but for all the people he had trampled on his way to the top. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt truly powerful. Not because she was tearing someone down, but because she was standing tall, using her strength, her intelligence, her resilience, to shape her own future. And as the cab carried her through the glowing streets of Chicago, Claire knew one thing, with absolute certainty. She was far from finished. The night of the gala at the Beverly Hills Hotel shimmered with the kind of opulence that masked sharpened ambitions underneath glittering chandeliers and silk gowns. Claire Whitmore arrived in a sleek black evening dress, her posture straight, her expression composed, her eyes coolly scanning the crowd. Beside her walked Zachary Moore, looking sharper than usual in a tailored navy suit, his quiet presence a calming anchor. This wasn't just another social event. This was a battlefield, and Claire knew it. For weeks, whispers had traveled ahead of her. The designer who had survived a very public betrayal. The woman who had taken on the formidable Han Global project and turned it into a headline-grabbing comeback. And behind the scenes, rumors swirled. Caldwell Tech, Ryan Caldwell's company, teetering under investigations for financial misconduct, its foundations cracking in real time. Claire had been careful, methodical, and relentlessly focused. But tonight, she would step into the same room as Ryan and Brianna for the first time since the night they had humiliated her at her own engagement party. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. She had prepared herself for anger, for confrontation, for icy stares and cutting words. But as she walked through the grand ballroom, hearing the murmur of conversations and the occasional curious glance sent her way. She realized something unexpected. She felt nothing for Ryan Caldwell. Not love. Not hate. Just distance. Victor Hahn greeted them near the front of the room, his silver hair catching the light, his smile faint but knowing. "Claire, Zachary, glad you made it. The investors are eager to meet you." Claire shook Victor's hand firmly. "Thank you for the invitation, Victor. We're ready." As they began circulating, Claire felt the subtle shift in energy whenever she entered a conversation. People leaned in, curious, engaged. She was no longer the woman defined by scandal. She was becoming the woman defined by survival, by reinvention, by success. But then, a ripple moved through the crowd. Claire caught the movement in her periphery. Ryan and Brianna had arrived. Ryan looked polished, as always, in a crisp black tuxedo, his hair carefully styled, his expression one of strained calm. Brianna clung to his arm, wearing a sparkling silver gown, her smile just a little too wide, her eyes flicking nervously toward Claire. They hadn't expected her to be here. Or if they hadn't expected her to stand so tall. Claire turned away smoothly, focusing on the conversation in front of her. She didn't need to chase them down. She knew how these nights worked. Sooner or later, they would come to her. Sure enough, an hour into the gala, as Claire stood beside Zachary near the edge of the dance floor, Ryan approached. "Claire," he said smoothly, his voice practiced, charming. "You're looking well." Claire turned slowly, her smile polite, her gaze steady. "Ryan." Brianna hovered at his side, offering a thin-lipped smile. "Claire, it's been a long time." "It has," Claire agreed softly. She sipped her champagne, letting the silence stretch, watching as Brianna's discomfort grew. Ryan cleared his throat. "Listen, I was hoping we could talk, maybe clear the air. We're both professionals after all, and I think there might still be opportunities to work together." Claire's brows lifted ever so slightly. She saw it now, the cracks beneath Ryan's polished surface, the desperation he was trying so hard to conceal. "I appreciate the offer," Claire said calmly, "but I'm afraid our paths have diverged." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Claire, be reasonable. We have history. We could help each other." Claire met his gaze directly. "You're right, Ryan. We do have history, but that's exactly why I know I'm better off leaving it there." Brianna's voice cut in, sharp and brittle. "So you're really going to hold a grudge forever? That's not very professional." Claire turned to her fully now, her expression serene. "Brianna, this isn't about a grudge. This is about trust. And I don't trust either of you. Not as friends, not as colleagues, not as partners." The moment hung heavy in the air. Claire could feel the curious glances from nearby guests, the subtle hush falling over the small circle around them. Ryan's face flushed, a rare crack in his cool exterior. But before he could respond, Victor Hahn approached, resting a casual hand on Claire's shoulder. "Everything all right here?" Victor asked, his voice pleasant, but edged with quiet authority. Claire smiled. "Perfectly fine, Victor. We were just finishing up." Victor's gaze flicked to Ryan and Brianna, cool and assessing. "Good. Claire, Zachary, would you join me? I'd like to introduce you to a few key investors." Without another word, Claire turned, walking away alongside Victor and Zachary. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Later that night, as the gala wound down and guests began filtering out, Claire found herself standing on a balcony overlooking the glittering Los Angeles skyline. Zachary joined her, slipping his hands into his pockets, his expression thoughtful. "You handled that well," he said quietly. Claire let out a slow breath. "I wasn't sure how I'd feel, seeing them again." But it turns out I feel nothing at all." Zachary smiled faintly. "That's called moving on." Claire turned to look at him, her heart softening. "You've been by my side through all of this, Zach. I don't know what I would have done without you." He met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "You don't have to do anything without me, Claire. Not if you don't want to." For a moment, the noise of the party faded, the city lights blurred, and all Claire could feel was the quiet strength of the man beside her. A strength she had leaned on without even realizing it. But she also knew something else, something clear and sharp in her mind. She had fought her way back from devastation, not because of any one person, but because of who she had become. When Claire returned to her hotel suite that night, she stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city, her reflection a faint ghost in the glass. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the climb, the fight, and she knew, with a fierce certainty, that she was far from finished. Ryan Caldwell might have tried to tear her down. He might have used every trick, every connection, every underhanded tactic. But Claire had outlasted him. She had outshone him. And as his empire crumbled under the weight of its own corruption, Claire was just getting started. Her future blazing open before her like the endless stretch of city lights below. The air inside Claire Whitmore's new design studio in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with quiet purpose. Natural light flooded through the tall windows, casting warm gold across polished floors, sleek workstations, and scattered sketches of upcoming projects. There was a hum of voices in the background. Her team, once a small Chicago-based group, now expanded into a national force. It had taken months of relentless effort, determination, and a kind of stubborn vision. But Claire had done it. She had transformed what was once a near collapse of her career into a resurgence so strong, so undeniable, that even her harshest critics had gone silent. And yet, even now, success sat on her shoulders like a quiet, unexpected weight. She sat, alone at her desk, reviewing the final terms of a multi-year partnership agreement with Hahn Global. Victor Hahn himself had come by earlier, smiling with genuine pride as they signed the deal. It was a contract that would secure her studio's future, placing her name among the most respected, powerful figures in the design industry. But the victory was not just about numbers. It was about standing here, after betrayal, after heartbreak, after humiliation, knowing she had not only survived, but grown beyond every limit they'd tried to trap her within. There had been no word from Ryan Caldwell in weeks. His once dazzling empire had collapsed under mounting investigations. The stories were everywhere. Allegations of financial misconduct, evidence of tax evasion, testimonies from former employees coming forward to describe toxic, illegal practices inside Caldwell Tech. And Brianna Lane? She had vanished from the social scene almost overnight, her influencer accounts scrubbed clean, her name retreating into embarrassed silence. Claire suspected that, wherever Brianna was now, she was trying desperately to rebrand herself, to shed the fallout of the scandal she had once been so eager to step into. Claire looked up when Zachary Moore entered the room, 2 coffees in hand. He set one down in front of her, his familiar grin softening the tension in her chest. "Thought you could use a break," Zach said, sinking into the chair across from her. Claire wrapped her hands around the cup, feeling its warmth seep into her fingers. "Thank you," she murmured. "For everything, Zach. I couldn't have done this without you." Zach tilted his head, his smile gentle. "You did this, Claire. I was just here to remind you what you're capable of." Claire exhaled slowly, her heart tightening at the truth of his words. For so long, she had defined herself in relation to someone else, to Ryan, to their plans, to their shared ambitions. But over the last year, she had learned to stand in her own light. And now, as she looked at Zach, at this man who had been beside her not because he wanted anything from her, but simply because he believed in her, she felt something shift. "Zach," she said softly, "you've been by my side through everything. I know I haven't said it enough, but you mean more to me than just a business partner." His expression softened, a quiet vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "Claire, you don't have to explain. I'm here. I'll always be here. Whatever you need, whatever you want." For a moment, the noise of the office faded away, the rest of the world narrowing until it was just the two of them. Claire reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. "I'm finally ready to start living for myself, Zach. And maybe that means making room for more than just work." Zach smiled, his hand turning to gently squeeze hers. "Then we take it one step at a time." That evening, as the sun dipped below the Los Angeles skyline, Claire found herself standing alone on the rooftop terrace of her building. The city stretched out before her in glowing ribbons of light, the sky painted in hues of pink and gold. She thought back to the woman she had been a year ago, the woman who had stood humiliated on a ballroom stage, the woman who had walked away from the ruins of an engagement, the woman who had cried in the darkness of her apartment, unsure if she would ever be whole again. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone stronger, wiser, unafraid. Claire smiled softly, breathing in the cool evening air. She didn't need Ryan Caldwell's approval. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had something far better. Freedom. Freedom to design the life she wanted. Freedom to choose her own partners, her own battles, her own triumphs. And as she gazed out at the sprawling city, she knew the best chapters of her life were still unwritten, still waiting to unfold. When Zach joined her on the rooftop, slipping an arm around her shoulders, Claire leaned into him, her heart light, her mind clear. "I used to think," she said quietly, "that success was proving everyone wrong. But now I think it's about proving myself right." Zach kissed the top of her head. "Then you've already won, Claire." Below them, the city pulsed with life, its endless possibilities stretching out like a promise. Claire closed her eyes, smiled, and whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Claire Whitmore's story is one of stunning transformation, a journey that takes her from devastation to triumph, from heartbreak to self-mastery. In the beginning, Claire was a woman standing at the pinnacle of what she believed was love, ready to build a life with Ryan Caldwell, a man she trusted, a partner she believed in. She had built her life around him, sacrificed career opportunities, held back her own ambitions, and adjusted her dreams to fit the shared future they envisioned. But betrayal hit her like a wrecking ball. That fateful night at the engagement party was more than just a public humiliation. It was the moment her carefully constructed world came crashing down. Ryan's affair with Brianna Lane, Claire's childhood best friend, wasn't just a romantic betrayal. It was a shattering of trust, a dismantling of identity. In that moment, Claire had a choice: collapse under the weight of her grief, or rise, and rise she did. At first, she sought refuge in work, in the creative fire that had always been part of her essence. With Zachary Moore by her side, a steady friend, a quiet champion, Claire re-entered the professional world, not as Ryan's shadow, but as her own force. When Han Global offered her the Eco Resort project, it wasn't just a business opportunity. It was a lifeline, a way for Claire to rebuild herself on her own terms. Yet success rarely comes without resistance. Ryan, threatened by Claire's resurgence, launched a smear campaign, accusing her of plagiarism and trying to sink her reputation. But Claire, hardened by betrayal, had learned how to fight smart. She built a legal team, rallied public support, and unveiled Ryan's own corruption, not from spite, but from a sense of justice and integrity. What's remarkable is that Claire's revenge wasn't the petty kind. She didn't lower herself to Ryan's level. Instead, she elevated herself, rose above the noise, and let her work, her talent, and her ethics speak for themselves. The result? Ryan's empire crumbled under the weight of its own lies, while Claire's career soared to national prominence, her studio expanding into one of the most respected names in the industry. But the greatest transformation wasn't just professional. Personally, Claire underwent an even more profound journey. She rediscovered herself, her resilience, her independence, her self-worth, and she began to understand that love, true love, isn't about sacrificing yourself for another person. It's about building something meaningful alongside someone who respects you, supports you, and wants you to thrive. With Zach, Claire found not just a business partner, but a friend who had quietly stood beside her through every storm. And when the noise of scandal faded, when the bright lights dimmed, she realized she had space in her heart again. Space not for dependency, but for connection, partnership, and mutual respect. Claire's story is more than just a tale of revenge. It's a tale of renewal. It teaches us that the worst moments of our lives, the betrayals, the heartbreaks, the public failures, are not the end. They can be the beginning of something even greater if we have the courage to stand back, up, to face the world with clear eyes, and to choose ourselves. The key lesson here is not to let the actions of others define who you are. When someone betrays you, they reveal who they are. But you reveal who you are by how you respond. Claire's response was not immediate rage or reckless retaliation. It was resilience, strategy, and self-respect. She reminded us that real power doesn't come from hurting others. It comes from building a life so strong, so fulfilling, that those who once tried to harm you can no longer touch you. So how can we apply this in our own lives? Ask yourself. When life throws you into darkness, whether through heartbreak, betrayal, job loss, or personal failure, will you let that darkness define you? Or will you take it as a signal to rise, to rebuild, to rediscover the parts of yourself you may have neglected? Claire's journey invites all of us to reflect on where we give away our power and how we can reclaim it, not just through success or revenge, but through growth, self-awareness, and true personal freedom. Now, let's make this interactive. Here's a small quiz to get you thinking. If you were in Claire's position, which mindset do you think is most powerful? A. Focus only on defeating those who hurt you, no matter the cost. B. Focus on rebuilding yourself so strongly that their actions no longer define or affect you. Comment below with A or B. We can't wait to see how you think. And beyond the quiz, we want to know, what's your opinion on Claire's story? Do you agree with how she handled her revenge and comeback? Would you have done things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love for everyone to exchange ideas and learn from each other. If you enjoyed this story and want to support the channel so we can keep creating inspiring, powerful content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support gives us the motivation to keep bringing you the best stories and lessons. See you in the next video.